Well, not only have schools gone back, shall we today, in session, but also Parliament goes back as well. And almost immediately, out of the gate, out of nowhere, Frost came out yesterday. Well, not yesterday, but on Friday, I think it was, with this very, very quote unquote tough speech. But it really was not a tough speech. Essentially, all Frost did was he'd said in every single word of sense that he wanted a renegotiation without saying that he wanted a renegotiation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. What he said, he would prefer an agreement on these. But this just goes to show you how weak our position really is when it comes to Northern Ireland. Again, like I say, think back to what we've talked about the four key things that the Brexiteers said were going to happen when we left the EU. First of all, that the EU would fall apart without us. And second of all, that we would be able to remain in the single market without any of its drawbacks. That third of all, we would get this amazing deal with America, which would make staying in the single market completely ridiculous. And then fourth of all, on the Northern Ireland case, is that we would have a complete free hand in these Northern Ireland negotiations to be able to essentially dictate whatever we wanted terms to Ireland. Those were the four key assumptions which Brexit was built on. And I've said before, go back in time, do the old, UKIP Doctor Who, and look back in time to what people like Nigel Farage was saying, Daniel Hannan, and all these, again, supposed big brains of Brexit were saying about Brexit more than 10 years ago. And those were the four key assumptions that they were basing Brexit on. None of those have happened. As a result, this is where we've ended up. And as I always say, if you want a different view, shall we say, of politics that's going on in your own country, well, then sometimes you've got to look at, shall we say, other countries' newspapers. And as we very, very often do, we end up looking at the Irish Times. The Irish Times very often do some absolutely incredible, more accurate reporting from, again, an outside point of view. And again, this outside point of view is incredibly helpful when you're trying to analyze and look at the bigger picture of Brexit and what's going on in British politics. So, as always, before we do jump into this article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support me that way. So, on with the article. Like I say, we jump across the Irish Sea today just to have a look at the Irish Times, with their title of the article being called The Northern Ireland Protocol. Frost tough talk can't conceal Britain's weak position. David Frost's speech to the British Irish Association in Oxford has set the tone for what promises to be another noisy week in negotiations over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Frost will make a statement in Parliament during the week to announce an extension of the grace periods due to expire at the end of the month, which delay the implementation of parts of the protocol. Before that, the DUP leader, Jeffrey Donaldson, will make a speech in which he is expected to threaten to pull down the Stormont institutions unless the protocol is scrapped or transformed. Now, bear in mind, this is a deal that Frost himself negotiated, as well did Johnson, and as the DUP at the time heavily supported. So, whoops. But again, what shock, horror. Extension of the grace periods due to expend at the end of this month. So again, they're kicking the can in terms of the Irish protocol down the road. I do not think this affects our dates that we are expecting to come at the end of October. I think those could very much stay in place. We'll have to see. But again, just goes to show you the weakness of our position. So the stage is set for another fresh installment of the long-running drama of the Brexit talks. And in talks in crisis, as Britain tries to stand firm, or even perhaps not. Frost's statement to the House of Lords is likely to be very belligerent and graceless. The Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis will deliver the same words with even less grace in the Commons. And the European Commission's response will sound very weary and grudgingly. But the upshot will be the removal of another cliff edge at the end of September and the creation of some negotiating space to try and close the gap between the two sides. Frost's speeches identified that the gap, that is the distance between the EU's offer to try and resolve the protocol's problems by implementing it more flexibly and Britain's demand for a new agreement to try and supplant it. Britain wants to try and change the protocol's provision on the movement of goods into Northern Ireland, the standards for goods within Northern Ireland, and the governance arrangements for regulating this. So essentially, the question then comes, where do you put the hard border? That is the same question we have been asking again and again and again. At the moment, the border is in the Irish Sea, which keeps effectively Northern Ireland in the customs union and the single market. There has to be that hard border where there are checks. Now, again, according to the Good Friday Agreement, you cannot have a border between the North of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. That is just completely out of the question. So once again, where do you put the border? And again, we enter complete fantasy lands of Brexit talks because, again, Frost is not there to be someone who can come up with solutions. He's been put there as an antagonist to try and inflame these problems so that Johnson can then go to his Brexit supporting base and say, look, we're trying to negotiate these things. We're trying to make things, quote unquote, better. But it's just the EU that are doing this. No, it's not. This entire thing is a Brexit issue. This entire protocol was negotiated and agreed to and signed to and proposed by the UK government. Also, Frost also will try and set out the limits of what his government is demanding and asserting that its proposals go with the grain of the protocol and did not seek to remove it. EU negotiator Markus Savonik recognizes the real problems the protocol is creating for businesses and customers in Northern Ireland and is willing to engage with Frost on finding solutions within the framework of the agreement. But he has no mandate to negotiate outside of that framework, and there is no prospect of EU leaders agreeing to a renegotiation of that protocol. Frost asserts that the threshold of triggering Article 16, which allows one side to unilaterally suspend parts of the protocol, has been reached. One British commentator described the threat to trigger Article 16 as a loaded gun on the table. But that gun is not loaded, and it doesn't work, and it is in a locked box on the other side of the room. Britain has not triggered Article 16 up until now because it would not resolve the difficulties that the protocol presents, and it would risk the costly retaliation from the EU and damage the relations with Washington even more. Frost talks tough in Oxford at the weekend and at Westminster this week cannot conceal the weaknesses of Britain's negotiating position. And like I say, this is where we are. We're literally back to square one again. This is it. This is just the revolving door of Brexit. Frost will make some big speech saying the Northern Ireland Protocol is not working for the people and needs to be renegotiated. But then Markus Savonik says, well, yes, there's this entire framework which we can work in. Perhaps we need to, look at this framework and see where we can work. The problem is, it is the UK that does not want to make the protocol work. Again, this is just why Frost was put there. He was put there as an antagonist against the EU. He is not there to try and negotiate in good faith. He was just being put there to, inflame situations so that Boris can turn around and blame the EU when things start to go wrong. And like I say, Frost can threaten Article 16 all he wants. But if he ever actually dared to trigger Article 16, even if Boris Johnson was shouting at him to pull the trigger, they know what would happen. the EU would retaliate, as would Washington, and things would go from naught to from naught to 60 very bad, and it wouldn't be the fault of the EU, it would be the fault of us. And the problems, not only just at the Irish border, but the soon to be problems on our very own border, will become a lot worse. And like I say, the EU has far more power to retaliate over on us than we do to them. It's just that simple. And like I say, Brexiteers have been shouting for decades that the EU needs us more than we need them. Again, as we've said before, that is completely and utterly false. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all